Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Fortuna admissions series on how to get into one of the world's best business schools. Today, we're going to talk about Harvard Business School. Now, Harvard is pretty darn difficult to get into. Last year, only 12.5% of those who applied to the school got into its MBA program. And we have with us today Rebecca Fogg, who's an MBA coach at Fortuna Admissions. A Harvard MBA, yes. Even more than a Harvard MBA, someone who worked closely with one of the school's legendary professors, the late Clayton Christensen, the innovation guru. And Rebecca's going to share with us her insights and her perspectives on, how to tilt the odds in your favor if you really want to get into Harvard Business School. Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I know there are secrets, but sometimes the secrets are kind of commonsensical, aren't they?
That's very true.
So if you were to say, what are the most common traits of people who get into Harvard Business School, what would they be?
Perseverance, self-knowledge. I'm going to say community-mindedness, so thinking about something bigger than themselves, and curiosity.
Oh, those are good ones. I think I can get into Harvard now, even though I have a 580 GMAT and my GPA at my undergraduate institution was 2.8. Just kidding.
I hope you had a lot of fun.
Let's dive deep on some of those characteristics.
So a few of them are what we would call table stakes. Everyone who gets in is going to have them, and many of the candidates will have them as well. And then the other few I'm going to talk about are things that you really need to exhibit in your application that are the differentiators.
I should mention that you are an MBA coach at Fortuna Admissions. And the sort of trademark about Fortuna is that the firm tries to acquire former people who've been involved in admissions at the school, so they have more of an inside track on how to get in. So let's go through your table stakes first, Rebecca.
So table stakes, they really want to see engaged community citizenship. And those are their words. And for those of you who've already done a lot of reading about Harvard, read their own materials, this is going to be familiar to you. What that really means is that you care about something larger than yourself. That can be something that is very personal to you. Maybe it arises from a family situation or something in your background. Maybe it is something that has emerged in the workplace, but they need to know that it's not just your career, the money, the title, those very external examples of success that motivates you.
Let me ask you, why is that important? Because I know this is true in a lot of schools. Now, why is that important?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the fact is, Harvard and those very elite schools, they really have their pick of candidates, and they like to think about their influence in the world as well. And let's face it, there are many, many leaders in boardrooms and C-suites that come from Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
And Harvard wants to have a positive impact as well. And that doesn't mean that everybody is going to cure cancer or be working in social impact fields, but they know that their graduates have an outsized influence on corporations, on businesses, on communities. So they want to make sure that the people that they are graduating have integrity and want to have a positive impact, aren't just out there getting what's theirs, and that they are going to be using their talents. And in fact, that they are motivated and thrilled to use their talents to be bringing up the people around them and having a positive impact on the community.
That makes sense. Now, Rebecca, isn't there a difference between merely being involved in something that's beyond yourself and leading something that's beyond yourself?
That's very true. And there are a lot of different ways to think about thought leadership. So people who are applying to business school might be quite early in their careers. And so your opportunity to exhibit leadership in a classic sense, which might mean people management and large budget management. Perhaps some people will have that, perhaps they won't. But there's also thought leadership. There is, the person who is getting under the numbers or very observant about how the team is doing, or very curious and reaching out to understand an initiative and see where the needs are and is taking an initiative to do that. So there are a lot of ways to think about leadership. And, that is something that they're looking for. You will take on many of those leadership roles in your career, but they're looking at this stage of the game for where have you done it? Maybe it hasn't been as much at work as it was in an extracurricular that you did very seriously in your spare time now or through university. So there are a lot of different ways to show that you have leadership qualities and that you've exhibited it to positive effect.
Yeah, really good point. What else in terms of table stakes? Obviously, there are the stats, whether it's a GMAT or GRE score or the transcript from your undergraduate education.
Yep, absolutely. So that's what would fall under Harvard's description of analytics, aptitude, and appetite. And what we like to say is, they're not looking for quant geniuses. They're not looking for the spreadsheet monkeys. I mean, it's great if that's your thing, but what they really want to know is that you're not afraid of numbers, that you are numerate, that you can learn these things, and most importantly, that you are internally motivated to understand what they can tell you. So most of all, they want to know that you can do the work, and the work entails being analytically minded and consuming the numbers. And you're going to learn how to do that better while you're there, but you need to bring a certain base level of appetite and capability.
So how much weight do you think Harvard applies to a standardized test score? The median there for GMAT is 730, which has been pretty consistent year after year after year. But how much weight do you think they actually apply to that?
The answer is it's always one of many factors.
Yes.
So, the average is 730, but actually the range is quite broad.
Yeah.
And I can say a number is never going to get you in. If you don't have everything else, you can have the best GMAT in the world, and they could fill the entire class with people with fantastic GMAT scores. But that doesn't make you a leader. That doesn't make you an influential person who's going to, lead organizations and bring new ideas to the world. So how much they weight your GMAT, I think, really depends on the rest of your application and what that application is telling you about it. So if they're seeing, for instance, here's something that I see sometimes in clients who are coming from a very, non-traditional background, non-traditional for MBAs. So they're not coming from finance, private equity, investment banking, consulting. They might not actually have had a ton of exposure to opportunities to show that analytic aptitude that we're talking about, but that you can show that you have approached the problems that you encounter in a very analytic way. And it's really important to be able to draw on all different parts of your experience to show that.
Now, I also would imagine that where you went to get your undergraduate degree and where you currently are employed or have been employed are important elements to the application as well. Am I right?
Yeah, all of those things matter. Again, what they're trying to do is they're trying to look at all of the different aspects. So it's what you have done, where you've done it, to get an idea of, do you have, the mental horsepower, the, intellectual horsepower? Do you have the internal drive? Do you have the values to contribute to the class, to get what Harvard has to offer you, and to be successful over the long term? So the weight of each of those different factors really depends on the whole picture. What's more important is that you have, over the big picture, that they get the sense that you are somebody who has what they need to succeed in terms of those personal characteristics, those intellectual capabilities, those values to succeed. How you show that can be a puzzle piece. The mix of contributors can be different. If you have this phenomenal work experience, I was starting to talk about, of some of the clients I've seen where, they have a very non-traditional work experience where maybe they haven't been able to show some of the typical ways of proving that they have it, but they're still able to prove it. Right. Maybe that GMAT score doesn't mean quite as much because they haven't had the exposure to all of the quant background or, some of the other background that other candidates do, but they've been able to show through their work experience that they really have what it takes. So they're going to look at and actually I should say Harvard is one of the only schools where the people who interview you, for instance, will have read the entire application. So that's how much they care about the entire picture. No one thing matters so much that it can outweigh everything else. And that's a positive. And, whether it's really positive or whether it's really negative, they're looking for that whole well-rounded picture.
Right. Now, what are some of the pitfalls that people stumble into that prevent them from getting into Harvard, even when, on the outside, you might look at their profile, you might look at the numbers, you might look at their leadership experiences and think, wow, this person can get in?
I would say there are two things. Well, there's several things. One of them is that they just haven't conveyed what they've got on the application. And I have to say that's got to be pretty common. One of the things that my clients are continually astonished by is how much introspection this process requires. And we might come upon that in some of your later questions. But you really need to be able to explain those unique qualities, values, and experiences you've had that have driven your success to date, because they need to have the confidence that you've got what it takes to be successful in the future. And so a big pitfall is when you actually don't know why you've done what you've done. You just set on the path. A lot of people have expectations for us and what it means to be successful. Our families do, society does. And it's very easy to hop on that treadmill and start running. And this is a moment, and there's nothing the matter with that, but this is a moment where Harvard wants to know that you actually are exhibiting your agency, that you're using your agency, that you are making active choices, that you know who you are, what you care about, and that you're making choices. And so one mistake is people don't do the introspection. They don't really know what's motivating them, or they aren't able to exhibit it in an application. They haven't done the work, or they haven't been able to convey it. And that's one way where we at Fortuna can really help.
Really good point. And actually, when it comes to executing your application, another issue here is, while you need to display these traits that are attractive to Harvard, that Harvard is looking for, it can't come off as a brag. So there is a nuance to this.
Yeah.
I'll call it a dance. It's a dance that is quite subtle, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting and such a pleasure, actually. So many of the clients I work with, maybe because that introspection at this early stage in your life and your career perhaps isn't as automatic. I find so much more humility than, the general reputation of an MBA is. And so I think that there is, a way to think about it really is confidence with an open mind and respect for others. I tend not to think of it as, confidence tempered by humility. It's really just, people who are genuinely open-minded, they want to understand more. It's more important to them to understand than to be right. It's very easy to be both confident and open-minded, and also people who have respect for others. And that is another way to show that you are confident but able to work in a group, that people are going to get as much out of working from you as you are going to get from working with them.
What other pitfalls? You mentioned there are a few.
There's the failing to convey what you do have on the application. There's not actually knowing what you do have on the application. Another one, I guess this goes under failing to convey. It's hard to dig deep enough. You have to get very raw and real, particularly in the essays. And I will say, you never have to reveal anything that you don't want to. This isn't about, TMI. There are no points for shockers and things like that. But if we dig deep, we realize we're motivated by a lot of different things, not just a career vision. And so people make the mistake by thinking that it's going to be too embarrassing to reveal something, or actually that it will be used against them. So for instance, sometimes people have struggled and they got fired from a job, or they took a job and it turned out to be not at all what they wanted and they didn't perform so well, or they had a health crisis, or they had a mental health crisis. This is human. Harvard knows you're human. If you say you're a superhero, they're just not going to believe it. So I think another mistake is to try to hide those really pivotal moments and experiences out of fear that they'll be held against you. There's a way to describe it that is not TMI, that is comfortable for you to share, but that lets Harvard know the formative experiences that make you a strong leader, that make you ambitious but positive to work with.
And for some international applicants out there who do not know what TMI is, it's too much information.
Yes, sorry about that.
I'm always explaining acronyms, always, because you never know who knows and doesn't, right?
You're right.
And in fact, I would think that the overuse of acronyms in an application is a bad sign, because it tells me that you're not a great communicator. And people who are engineers and who may not be as talented in writing and communicating, that is a stereotype, I understand, often use a lot of acronyms to describe their work situation. And I can only imagine admissions officials scratching their head at some of this, because I've seen some of this stuff, right?
John, everybody uses too many acronyms, not just the engineers. I can tell you.
Not me.
I just do it as well. Yeah. So actually, one of my Harvard professors famously said, if you can't explain things without using jargon, then you probably don't really understand it yourself. And I have never forgotten that. So yes, very often this process of going through and understanding what it is that you have to offer, what it is that you have to learn, and how do you know all that, it's looking through your working experience and just describing it. And yeah, you have to be able to do it without jargon, because that means you really understand it. And the other thing that doing it without jargon shows to the admissions committee is that you understand and respect your audience. So if you're using jargon, and of course, a lot of us, we fall into jargon just because it's kind of rote. But if you are using jargon, it means you're not really thinking about the impact of your words, your audience. Right. And that goes far beyond jargon. That goes on, people who, let's call it tone deafness culturally, or, when you're trying to bring a team together, all these sorts of things, you need to understand your audience and what they know and don't know, what's going to be interesting or engaging or intimidating. So that's another thing that you get to show in your application, is that you understand your audience and you respect them and want them to have an easy time learning what you need to tell them.
Right. Now, obviously, a school like Harvard, as all the top schools have, a self-selecting applicant pool. There are a lot of people who look at the numbers, look at the class profile and say, you know what, I don't stand the chance here. I'm not even going to apply. So who does apply tends to be very highly qualified to attend. I mean, the guesses out there are 80% of a given applicant pool at a highly selected business school generally are people who are not only qualified to attend, but who would do well in the MBA program and post-MBA. At Harvard, I know that Dee, the former managing director of admissions and financial aid at Harvard, told me she figures it's a little above 50%. Yet Harvard is routinely rejecting 9 out of 10 applicants year after year. So with that incredibly talented pool, let's say half of the pool is qualified to attend and do well. And I think that's a conservative estimate. So that would be in a good year with 10,000 applications, 5,000 people. And yet there are only 900 some seats available in the class. So what separates the 1,200 or 1,100 who get accepted, because not all enroll, from the other part of the 5,000 who are qualified to attend really? Is it some of these things that you mentioned? Because I imagine that at least half the pool has a lot of these characteristics.
The key is in the word qualified. What do you mean? For every school, that is going to be a little bit different.
Yes.
And, there's that difference between could you do the work? There's qualified in that sense. So we're talking about the table stakes. You've got the analytics, you're a team player, you've proven leadership. Everybody's done that. There's can you do the work? But then there's qualified. Are you going to be the kind of leader that Harvard hopes will make the world a better place? Or are you going to be the kind of person who thrives actually with case method? That is a big deal, to be able to think on your feet in front of people, quickly dust yourself off when you've, maybe embarrassed yourself in class. We all do, because you've got to take those risks. There could be a lot of different reasons why they make these really tough decisions where they know someone's incredibly talented, incredibly motivated, and also really put their best effort ahead, in good faith effort. But they're going to say no because perhaps the person isn't quite right for this program. Maybe it could be the case method, the learning style, or it could be, the way they have differentiated themselves, how much they've been able to articulate in the application. But another thing I would say is Harvard is looking at a class composition. Okay, that's the other thing.
That's really true. Yep.
They're very much thinking about what is the experience going to be for the collective? And so, as I like to joke, thank goodness I applied before any other 6-foot-tall former violinist, because once you got one of those, you definitely don't need two. So, I can't say that's exactly the way they're making the decisions, but they are thinking about all kinds of diversity. They want diversity of perspective and background and thought and experience. And that shows up in a lot of different ways. So, one of the challenges that applicants have is they're coming from those very traditional fields. And it's going to be a lot harder to distinguish yourself if you're coming from private equity, banking, all of those different fields. You've got to show that you're a person that can contribute something unique, despite the fact that your work experience isn't unique.
Right.
So, some of the people they're turning away, it's just not a great fit for the program, but they know you're wonderful. Other people, it's a matter of just, will you thrive there? And also, are you helping fill out a class that in the collective is going to thrive together?
Now, based on what I know, roughly a quarter of the people who apply to Harvard Business School get interviewed, and roughly 40% or slightly more get an invite to attend. That's a pretty tight screen. And the round one application this year is September 6th. Is it too late? In other words, if you are someone who wants to apply in this cycle, is it too late to start now for round one? And should you already just say, hey, you can't submit an excellent application in that short period of time. You should be applying in round two, which has a January 3rd deadline. What do you think?
It's absolutely not too late, but you need to be honest with yourself. You need to know where you are in the process, as in, have you taken your GMAT or your GRE? Was it the best you could possibly do? Where are you on that introspection continuum? Another thing that I think nails people and gets them, off the accept pile is not having a really thoughtful, feasible career vision that they're genuinely motivated to do. And so that's another thing, do you really know what you want to do next? Because Harvard wants to see that you have a vision that you can achieve. So, where are you on that process? Do you, have you really done your school research? Lots of people just say, well, I'm going to apply to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. And you do need to know why. Hate to tell you, but you do need to know why. You need to know what kinds of programs they offer that only they can offer, that are going to help you achieve your particular career vision. So, have you talked to people in the field that you are hoping to get into? Have you done some volunteer work in that area? Have you spoken to current students and alums? All that. So how far along are you, mainly on the research and self-knowledge process? If you're doing pretty well in that area and you're really willing to put in the time, So nights and weekends, and making some time for those coaching calls if you're going to work with some of us, and put the effort in. And there's definitely time. I do have clients who are, just getting rolling now, but you have to get rolling now.
And I'm assuming you have a framework or a process for how you work with a given applicant.
Yes.
And I'm imagining that it really does start with the exercise of introspection. Am I right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a phased series of, I would say, thought exercises, and it starts out with a strategy worksheet where you are literally doing a compendium of your experience and, all of those quant scores. And then you start to get into the motivations, why did you choose this? Why did you move away from that? And that's the raw material that we draw on to understand what your career vision is. That's the next part of the work that you're going to do. See if it makes sense. Does that match up? Figure out what that narrative is. And so we lead you through a series of exercises. You've got to do the hard work, but we're there to be a sounding board and to ask them very hard questions. And trust me, my clients can tell you the questions can get hard, but it's rewarding in the end. About where you've been, where you want to go. And then another really important one is your leadership behaviors. So where have, it's that inventory of what are all the things that you're really good at, some of the things that you're fine at, some of the things that you really struggle to do that you need to get better at, because those are all going to be cross-referenced across your achievements and your visions so that you're painting that raw and real portrait for Harvard of, the whole you that is going to be able to thrive there and going to be able to contribute and get a lot out of it.
Right. And I would bet that there are a lot of people who have never really gone through a deep and profound introspection.
Yep.
Even people who are as successful as those who apply to Harvard Business School, meaning that they had to go probably to a highly selective undergraduate institution in general, highly selective employer or employers in general, which tends to be the profile of Harvard Business School students. So this can be very difficult for some people, and particularly for, I think, many international students.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're used to just getting the number, right? You get the number and you get in, but this is not about that.
And I'm going to say, even for the, the American students, introspection at this level isn't broadly encouraged in the, in the workplace and in schooling up to this point. I won't say it's discouraged, but we achieve by, in our early years by doing what the teacher says and more, doing what the boss says and more. It's not always thinking out of the box or, saying, I'm not sure if I want that anymore. And also the time, you're working really hard, you're running very fast just to achieve what you have achieved. So, there's no shame in not having had this deep moment of reflection at this point. What I do find is very often the people who already have had that time of reflection, it's been through some kind of adversity or hardship, which many of us have had by that point. It's a family bereavement, or it's an illness, or it is a big disappointment in the professional world. So wherever you are in that reflection process, that is one of the terrific benefits of working with a coach, because it is a very safe environment. It is a confidential environment where we can elicit the questions. It's not therapy, but we can ask the right questions, and you have this glorious, unusual space to actually think about it. And what's wonderful is when clients have a revelation, and and it's fun for us actually, because a lot of times we're the ones who put the dots together first. We say, wait a second, you did this, you loved this, you hated this, and then that happened. I think maybe you're really motivated by X. And they're like, that's it. So, and it's something actually that, once people get to the higher levels of business, it's very common to hire an executive coach. But you know what? That's 25 years later than it would have been helpful. So this is a wonderful process. Wherever it gets you in, it is a wonderful process to inform your next steps, whatever they are. whether it's Harvard, another school, or another few years of work.
Good point. Rebecca, what a joy it's been to meet you and to speak with you about this. I think you provided a lot of advice here in this short period of time for people who really want to go for the brass ring at Harvard. So we've been speaking with Rebecca Fogg. She's an MBA coach with Fortuna Admissions. You can check them out either on our website or their website, obviously fortunaadmissions.com. And maybe you'll, start your journey with this introspection, guided by Rebecca as your Sherpa through to your journey to Harvard Business School. Rebecca, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And I wish everybody out there listening tremendous luck.
Me too. All right. You've been watching our Fortuna Admissions series on how to get into the best business schools in the world. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching.